One of the most important elements for DMC to even be able to function the way it does lies within its lock-on system, which allows for the game to offer you a small number of simple directional inputs in 3D space, originally only forward and back, with DMC4 onward introducing a third of back to forward into the mix. Along with the free switching of other modifiers like styles and weapons, it lies at the core of how exactly Dante is able to possess such a large variety of attack and defense options, accessible in an instant as their own independent abilities. Or how Nero's Red Queen can bear such a quite considerable moveset all within just one attack button. That said, while the importance of the lock-on cannot be understated, with its removal in the reboot for example leading to several repercussions like a drastic decrease in the character's toolkits. I'm not saying the weapons are bad, I really like some of them, but it is a fact that they are individually quite limited. It's not like it has always been sunshine and rainbows. In today's little essay, I would like to take a look at some of the frustrating mistakes the lock-on mechanic went through across the series, before arriving where it is today. My issues pertain mostly to DMC 1 and 2, however there's also something in DMC 3 that's been grinding my gears for years, yet which I rarely ever hear anyone address. From the series' inception, back in DMC 1, it feels like they were dead set on making the lock-on button something you would be holding down not just constantly, but near permanently, with not just the vast majority of unlockable abilities involving it in some way, but this game in particular even refusing to let the player fire any of his guns without holding the R1 button, unless they're airborne for some reason, drawing your pistols and changing your interact buttons to gunfire, same as Tomb Raider, and I guess Resident Evil. I sometimes wonder if the insistence lies solely on making the player aware of its existence, since swimming section aside, DMC1 doesn't have any tutorial prompts whatsoever, so unless they assumed you would read the manual, it might have been their way of enforcing that the player has to find out about the lock-on and its purpose early on. Whatever the reason, it results in a game that encourages you to be holding lock-on practically during any combat encounter, which makes the insanely hard auto-lock an absolutely baffling choice in my opinion. Whenever you swing your sword in DMC1, despite making the deliberate decision to not be holding lock-on like you would 95% of the time, it still insists that Dante swing directly towards a random enemy that exists somewhere within the general area. There's very little control you have over this, with it being basically left up in the air who Dante will aim his attack towards, as if your stick direction didn't even matter. This issue is somewhat expounded by DMC1 being the only game in the series to not include any sort of lock-on reticle, which is quite strange considering its targeting system feels strongly inspired by Zelda Ocarina of Time, which even has similar looking attack animations for its lock-on attacks as High Time and Stinger. And let it be known that in OOT, while Z targeting isn't held down, Link is able to attack in whatever direction freely. Matthew Matos's video on context sensitivity, for example, shows him attacking with the stick directed towards one of the two enemies to Dante's right, only for the game to make him swing at the marionette in the complete opposite direction. Your entire combo being locked on onto the specific enemy that Dante decides to go for on his own accord, unless he dies in the middle of it, which then only results in you snapping over to another random enemy, which you yet again have no control over. The direction of your stick is irrelevant. In this clip, I'm permanently holding the stick down towards the purple marionette, but Dante just refuses until the blue one is dead. And surely everyone remembers fighting Nightmare and making your way towards attacking one of the panels on the wall, only for your attack to auto-lock towards the invincible blob crawling its way across the battlefield 20 meters away from you, as opposed to the big glowing button you stood right next to and were aiming your stick towards, simply because Dante wasn't yet rubbing his nose directly in it. The dive kick especially was something that pissed me off, because of how much of a powerful movement tool it can be in later titles. Yet in DMC1, trying to use it to get around in combat arenas would send you back towards the enemy you were trying to escape from instead. From my experience with the speedrun community, I actually learned that you're allowed to free aim your dive kick by holding R2 in the air, which I do make frequent use of and appreciate, but after having to suffer through this happening over and over again for so long, it's hard to show forgiveness. Essentially, when you're fighting a crowd of enemies in DMC1, unless you have a particular target already picked out while holding R1, you really have no way of knowing who you'll swing towards. Needless to say, that's unacceptable. And one frustrating thing that I swear I've realized within my past couple playthroughs is that lock-on even seems to have a strange little startup animation, which can absolutely eat your inputs, leading to you trying to perform a quick stinger only for Dante to not even swing his sword, despite me definitely pressing triangle, or moments where I go for a dodge roll, but the animation of Dante readying his guns, eating my button press, and leading to me taking a fireball to the face, as I should have just jumped. DMC2, despite being damped by the same horrendous auto-lock as its predecessor, makes a couple valuable improvements in certain regards, such as adding a visible lock-on reticle and the target switch function by clicking in the L3 button. And while I literally went fucking insane at parts the first time I played this game because of several instances where you are demanded to strike something while enemies non-stop spawn all around the room, which Dante will auto-target to instead, yet again leading to you swinging at dead air instead of the thing directly next to you which you're aiming your stick towards. It wouldn't be fair of me to not mention DMC2 making the R2 button something you can hold at any point to override the auto-lock. So as mad as I may have gotten trying to press these 3 buttons with the infinitely spawning birds for the first time, this is something that the lock-on override, which the game never tells you about, can fix. It's basically like the thing you can do with the DMC1 dive kick, just applied to your moveset across the board. Yet even with these objective improvements and additions, the game's lock-on is still plagued by several design flaws and even all new ones which lead to constant frustration. As you probably know if you ever watched a video on this game, they for some reason had the brain-dead idea to change the way the combo strings work from pauses to tilting the stick in random directions after a certain number of hits. Because this type of input conflicts with the existing directional attacks of High Time and Stinger though, these different combo strings can only be executed while locked off. So it adds this kind of unnecessary element of regularly having to hold and let go of R1 to get access to your full moveset, when the pause combo solution is a lot more of an elegant way to modify the neutral attack strings without interfering with directional attacks. And I'm sure you can see the other issue here. Because the stick input essentially replaces the pause as the thing to trigger the attack alteration, they made it basically work like a button press instead of, well, left stick. Meaning that yet again, when you are swinging your sword and trying to turn a certain direction as you do, it will continue going the same way towards the auto-locked enemy. You'd think that, this is where the R2 button comes in, but somehow it only makes it even worse in a way. While yes, you can hold R2 to guide an attack in the actual direction you're facing, I know, what a revolutionary concept. Once you do so, you are completely locked into that direction. And guess what? Try to turn another way? It's back to doing your alternate combo strings, just continuing to lead into the initial direction, which will lead to situations like this, where you are supposed to swing at an orb you can't target, with other enemies around you which will drag your attacks towards them through the auto-lock unless you override it with R2, and then wildly swing away, attempting to get all the necessary hits on the orb as Dante keeps walking by it, but you're not allowed to turn since he will just keep going in the exact same direction until you came to a dead stop and waited for him to turn where you're actually holding the stick. And despite the target switch being a pleasant addition, it only works when holding lock-on for some reason. As we just established though, half your moveset requires you to specifically not be locked on. So even if you were to want to try to crowd control by using your strings as you click L3 to snap towards the various targets you actually want, it wouldn't be possible unless you pulled off some needlessly complicated unholy combination of attacking, holding R1 and clicking L3 repeatedly until you find your desired victim, letting go to tilt the left stick and alter your string, and then go back to holding R1 and target switching. Compare this to DMC3. In this game, they fixed the combo strings by reverting them to the pauses present in 1. But most importantly, the fucking attacks you do actually go where you point them now. So the thing I just described as being a hardly possible awkward mess in 2 is utter child's play here. I swing my weapon at the switch on the wall, turn to hit the enemies behind me and keep them off my back, before going right back to hitting the switch. It's so simple you wouldn't even pay it any mind, and yet somehow it took us all this time to get here. DMC3 and the rest of this series retains the auto lock for its firearms, with some very rare exceptions, but melee attacks, when not locked on, will go wherever you tilt the stick, the way they really always should have. So in that regard, I really have no complaints. DMC3 specifically does have a very strange, annoying quirk to its lock-on system though, which somehow never goes addressed, despite being something I see almost everyone get fucked by on occasion. And trust me, it can fuck you. You may remember how DMC5 received a lot of controversy for removing reversals after they were alive and well in the demo, with the developers claiming that people were doing them by accident. Quite honestly, a ridiculous statement, with the demo having DMC4 style reversals, which are very cool and fun, but require quite strict timing, knowledge of specific buffer windows, and high APM for you to be able to direct your directional input attacks away from your lock-on target. The thing is, back in DMC3, these accidental reversals are an actual thing, and they're an issue, because the attack input, as opposed to how 4 and 5 consider your stick direction in relation to the targeted enemy, in this game, is instead somehow derived from how your stick relates to where Dante is facing. This is a little hard to put into words, and you might wonder what the difference is. It sucks not really being able to show the inputs on my controller as I do, but watch this example. I high time a pride, and then Helmbreaker back down to the ground facing away from it. Now, if I input high time on the enemy again, despite me holding back away from him, because Dante is looking the direction that my stick is pointing, I instead get a completely unintended stinger. And you may think, well dumbass, don't Helmbreaker away from an enemy if you don't want this to happen. But this flipped reading of your lock-on inputs unfortunately applies to everything. As long as Dante hasn't perfectly turned to the guy you want to attack before you press the button, there is a chance of getting the wrong thing. And no fight exemplifies this better than Virgil. He is a dope boss, and a lot of it comes from him zipping all around the arena lightning quick. But one thing he just loves to do is teleporting behind you anime style. And precisely that leads to constant occurrences of freeze lock-on issues. I'm sure you can remember meaning to stinger towards Virgil, but instead of stinger, Dante will perform a whack-ass high time in a random direction. Most people shrug it off and just input stinger again until it works, but this is a dead play. What's a lot worse is that during Virgil 2, when he teleports up in the air behind you to Starfall, trying to trickster dash away, will now instead of a trickster dash, since you're holding where Dante is facing, trigger an air trick, sending you teleporting directly into Virgil's attack and eating shit. Losing to this kind of thing is incredibly frustrating. Or Virgil or whatever other enemy attacks from behind you, you try and mess them up with a royal release, only for the game to give you RG Ultimate in the opposite direction instead, meaning no matter what you do, you're gonna take the hit. Okay, gotta put an addendum here. While getting footage for this video, I realized that some of the trickster stuff was slightly different than I remembered. Your melee attack inputs get messed up like crazy all the time, and the same goes for Royal Guard, as I said with the regular occurrence of it giving you ultimate instead of release. But with Trickster, there seems to be some kind of protection. The air trick thing does happen, but it's rarer than I thought, and most times when your input gets screwed up, instead of Dante teleporting, he instead Trickster dashes towards the enemy. This is me exclusively inputting Trickster dash away from Virgil, but despite the stick being held in the same direction the whole time, one of the 3 Trickster dashes will often go towards Virgil instead. Sometimes the first, but occasionally even the second or third. It is very bizarre. Either way, the important part is that very frequently you're made to lose reliable control of your character. There's more examples I could bring up of this being annoying, but I figure you get the point. It is a genuine issue, and I'm glad DMC4 and 5 went on to give your directional inputs the kind of consistent results they should. One thing 4 and 5 drop the ball in, however, is by, while retaining the target switch function, for reasons beyond my understanding, they made it so you're unable to do it unless your left stick is perfectly neutral, meaning the Devil May Cry with the smoothest target switching is the PS2 game. But I suppose every game in this series insists on having at least some sort of fuckery around its lock-on system, and I'll definitely take that flaw over the numerous ones the first 3 games present, as discussed in this video. Look at me, still procrastinating on the Ebony and Ivory essay, only for my Buster ranking to have absolutely blown the DT Amulet vid out the water. I don't even know what to say about fucking 16,000 views and yet another 140 subscribers hopping onto the pile. Thank you all very much. I'll definitely make sure to get around to ranking all of Nero's boss busters in a separate video soon. Also, by the time this video is up, the Demon Priest speedrun event will have concluded, so expect a video on that. And while I literally went fucking insane at parts, what the fuck?